like a little Anne Sexton chair up here. I wish. So, since lots of people who come to these things have heard me read before, it's sort of like, what shall I read? So I decided to go for a theme today, and I'm going to read weather poems. In part because not only our weather, but I went to school in Nebraska, and this past week they have had really incredible weather. Some of the worst snow that they've had since I lived there. When you get a foot coming in overnight, it's a lot, and that's the way it was my very first winter there. So I'd only been there a few months, and this poem sort of harkens back to that reality and thinking about, oh my gosh, what had I done going to Nebraska? It's called Inclement. This morning, cold rain bullets pierce my skin. Still, it is a relief from 37 inches of snow and wind chills lower than grade school children can count, minus 20, minus warmth, dead feet and hands. When I left the South, a friend gave me a copy of Springsteen's Nebraska, about Starkweather, blustering hometown killer, buried in the cemetery 3 blocks from where I live. I long for home, temperate Georgia, where my winter coat is the only stranger at the door. There is, I also discovered when I was living in Nebraska, a poet from New Orleans who's now gone. Everett Maddox was really a brilliant poet and scholar who's sort of just been being rediscovered in a sense. Everett unfortunately had a terrible drinking problem, and so for the last, I would say, probably 15 or 20 years of his life, he had managed to lose his tenured job at the University of Alabama, and he sort of was homeless, more or less, except that his home was the Maple Street Bar in New Orleans, where they have one of the oldest poetry reading series in the country. And Everett apparently sometimes he had a passion for scotch. In fact, one of his books is called Bar Scotch. But he would sit and he would just sort of write, and it's amazing to think how brilliant he was under those conditions, and that if he hadn't actually had such a tragic experience with alcohol, what he might have been able to do. But I sort of discovered his work and wrote this in response to one of his poems where he's sort of talking about weather and various things. It's called Abortive Midnight Journal Entry, after Everett Maddox. Here in Nebraska, I am buried under snow and self-pity. If only you weren't buried too, we could consult your dictionary, look for words that mean something, toast my newest job rejection letter. The reward for having advanced education is not employment, at least not the paying kind. Days like this, I want to drift down to the late Maple Leaf Bar, drink Louisiana humidity, thickened gin cotton coating my throat until the slow burn erases all thoughts of poetry. Ice storm, and this is actually about Georgia, where we have such things. A difficult beauty is in it, the inch of sheer water glistening in twilight as if weightless, the collapse imminent. Something of a shot rings out, a branch claws its way down, grasping the power lines into darkness. I watch from the window seat. A worker steers his cherry picker, Deus ex machina, toward the main transformer. He hauls up guide wires, his shadow chorus, eyes heavenward, moving strophe, antistrophe, until the sudden reconnection, the blinding light. So I have a couple of books that came out this year, and one is about Paris, pretty much exclusively about Paris, and then the other one is very much a southern book. And so I have a couple of interesting weather poems. I guess I'm more obsessed with weather than I thought. It's amazing how you can always find a theme if you're looking for one. One of the best stories I've ever heard is about Monet's son, Michael, who actually lived to be 90. And he apparently never sort of got over the famous father problem, right? I mean, sort of really was hung up on the famous father problem. And he was a very wealthy man because, you know, he inherited his father's estate, and he inherited all the paintings that had never sold, and wound up ultimately giving them all away to a beautiful museum that no one hardly ever goes to in Paris, the Montmartre, which I highly recommend if you're ever there. It's one of the cheapest places once you get out to it. But Michael certainly had a complex, and but the story about how he actually died was on a night not so much unlike the one we're having tonight. It was very rainy and very foggy, and I think the rest of it you'll get from this, and you'll know why I thought it deserved its own poem, because it's there are a lot of nines, which I think is sort of interesting. Monet's son. Michael inherited all the water lilies, trees, imported flowers, the house, and the bridge to a Japan in rural France. He lost the genius, his father only a ghost, just a reflection in the pond. At 90, like so many sons, he was still speeding away without any direction, until that one evening, sometime around 9 p.m., outside his father's garden, his Lamborghini topped 90, the slippery streets ebbing into night, the world only an impression. Meditation along the Seine. It is a city of muted light, overcast with the melancholy of my solitary walk along the quay. I find no one without match. Even the mist caresses my parapluie, literally one for the other. I think of you and tremble for the unarticulated, intuitive connection that would exist if only I could do more than imagine your embrace beckoning me across Pont des Arts toward the oldest kind of poetry.